Hello, friends and lovers. Can you believe it's been over 2 years since I made that aspect tier list in Hades? And the game literally has not changed since that time, but a lot of opinions have sort of evolved or formed better, or, honestly just straight up changed since that moment. And some of the meta has changed for veteran players, so I think it's about time that we get a bit of an update. So just like the first tier list, we're going to rank all 24 weapon aspects here. I'm not going to base it purely on their power level, I guess you could say. I'm going to think of different things like how high of a heat can they complete easily, how fast can they go in a kind of speedrun setting, but also, and probably most importantly, how fun they are and how much variety they have to keep playing over and over again. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's actually going to be a lot of differences here between my first tier list and this one, and I hope it can help you if you're either a new player or just someone just curious about what I think about the game. But of course, this is subjective, this is just what I think, but I am curious what y'all think, so if you got any disagreements or agreements, feel free to let me know in the comments. Alright, so we've been staring at aspect of Zag for the sword for long enough. Let's go over it here. So we got it pulled up on the wiki, and so basically aspect of Zag for the sword will give you bonus attack and move speed, and that's all it does. Now, this is going to be the case for most of the aspects of Zag Rails, but unfortunately, they're just not very interesting or useful aspects, especially the sword one here. It just doesn't do anything better than the other swords aspects. In fact, you'll see the very next one kind of just does everything better, which means that, aspect of Zag for the sword is just kind of boring, and there's kind of no reason to take it over the next aspect, which is going to be the aspect of Nemesis. Alright, so here is the aspect of Nemesis. So every time you use your special, your attack gains the chance to deal critical damage. So it goes up to 30% at max time blood level. Oh yeah, and I should probably point out the Zag aspects are going to be rough too. Part of the reason is that they weren't designed to be on the same playing field as the other aspects, so they cost a lot less Titan blood than the other ones. But anyway, let's talk about Nemesis here. The best sword aspect there is, I personally think, and I think most people would agree with me on this. It does really well at speed, and it can complete a run very quickly. And it does fine at high heat. I do think that all the sword aspects kind of struggle in their own way. It's a melee one, you know what I mean? It's not as good as the fist at clearing a higher heat level, and I'm mostly just talking up to 32. I'm not going to sit here and quote, 50 plus heat. It's just not necessary to discuss that for 99.9% of players. But yeah, aspect Nemesis, very good. It synergizes well with some of Artemis's boons, and it's just really strong. That 30% crit chance is very strong and way better than anything the Zag aspect can do on the sword. So this one's going to be, I'm going to give it a pretty high A, and it's probably going to be the highest of all the swords. So next we got the aspect of Poseidon. This is definitely one of the most interesting aspects in the game that does something really special. So when you use your special with the aspect of Poseidon, it will dislodge your cast from the enemies, and it gives you some bonus cast damage that's just straight up passive, up to 50%. Now, it is one of the better cast aspects, I guess you could say. It's decent. Unfortunately, it doesn't really compete with aspect Achilles, which is what we'll cover later in terms of just outputting a lot of cast damage. But that special effect of dislodging, it actually enables a lot of the different casts for it. So if you wanted to use True Shot from Artemis, if you wanted to use, Electric Shot from Zeus, if you want to use Crush Shot from Aphrodite, those all work a lot better with aspect of Poseidon than just using any other aspect, because you can dislodge them from the enemy more quickly. It does enable certain boons like exit wounds. I don't know if that's that great in general, but it is goofy fun, and it has a lot of variety, and all of the cast aspects are going to have a lot of variety because they kind of enable all of the different cast builds. You can have 8 different cast builds for this one aspect, which feels a lot different than, say, a typical attack or special based build like with Nemesis we were just talking about, where it feels like you can only have 2, 3, 4 gods perhaps on the attack that would make it interesting. But it does kind of lack in power level compared to the others. It doesn't do especially well at high heat or speed. It's kind of okay. It's still it's probably going to be one of the highest Bs though, if I were to guess, but I guess we'll see. Okay, last we have the aspect of Arthur. This is a lot of players' favorite aspect on the sword. So you get passive plus 50 health. It is a big, chunky swinging sword, very slow, but hits very hard. You can also put down an aura when you use your special that reduces the damage you take, and I think it reduces enemy bullet speed too. Yeah, it does mention it there in the description for enemy projectiles. You will take 40% less damage while you're standing on top of the ore, and it will disable traps, including lava, by the way, in case you didn't know. Now, I do not have a lot of fun with Aspect of Arthur because of just how slow it is. It comes across as just like a slow, chunky, it feels like you're wading through mud. And not only that, but it feels like it's very thin in terms of ways that you can play it. You can't really switch it up and do a special-oriented build where you just spam your special a lot. That doesn't really work on Aspect of Arthur. It's just way too slow. So you're just kind of swinging the sword around like crazy, and therefore there's only a few gods you can put on the attack too, like Artemis or Aphrodite or maybe Demeter or Athena. So it feels like you're kind of really stuck in this one slot. It doesn't do very well at speed. It doesn't do very well at high heat. It actually does okay at high heat up to 32, I would say, just because of that passive health more than anything, I think. At least it seems that way for a lot of players, but you do have to build your pack to build a little bit differently, where you're going to want to consider the fact that you will be attacking slower. But for me, it's kind of low on the fun factor. I recognize that this is probably not going to sit well with some others, but this is how I feel. It still does something more interesting, that's for sure, than Zag Aspect for the sword, but Arthur, for me, not a lot of fun. All right, and we're on to the spear. So we got Zag Aspect for the spear here. So it increases your special damage, range, and speed, only up to 25% though. This is another kind of a dud aspect in terms of the Zag ones especially. It just doesn't do a whole lot for us here. There are some viable builds with it if you get a very particular hammer, but otherwise it's just not good. If you swing and miss on the hammers, you're gonna have a pretty rough time with Aspect of Zag with the spear. But there is a bit of fun because there are some builds that exist for it that are kind of work almost only for it. Unlike Zag Aspect for the sword, if you get like Exploding Launcher, maybe Charge Skewer, either one of those or both, even I guess you could say, you're gonna clear a decent amount of heat. You can go decently fast too. It does something a little bit differently than the sword, but not a whole lot, and it doesn't really hold anything over any of the other spear aspects. All right, sorry, I'm trying to pull up Aspect of Achilles here, but it just doesn't really fit. So Aspect of Achilles, after you use your special and fetch your special, you can get up to 150% bonus attack or cast damage for your next 4 attacks or casts, basically. So you throw the special, you press the special button again, you rush after it, you get bonus damage on the next 4 attacks or casts. And then you have to refresh it. You cannot stop in the middle and refresh it after you say you've only used 2 of those buffs. You would have to use them all up before you can refresh it, otherwise you'd just be wasting it. This is a very strong aspect. It's very strong for all the different casts. It does really well. It has a couple of really strong hammers. So the one to speak of is Flurry Jab, is just incredibly strong. This is the fastest spear aspect by far, and it also enables a lot of cast builds that otherwise would not be usable at all. Like Crystal Beam, it really carries like Crystal Beam. Crystal Beam, you need a dual boon still anyway, but otherwise, without that 150% bonus cast damage you get from it, it wouldn't feel very good. Even Slicing Shot with Hunting Blades, which is the Ares cast and the dual boon, without Aspect of Achilles, you'll get by, but it's not gonna feel great. So Achilles, it's great for speed, it's okay for high heat, but it's really, really great for fun. And I think this is one of the big divergences I have here from my original tier list. I don't think I put Achilles in S, really, honestly. I can't remember now. But I think it definitely belongs there. It is easily the strongest spear aspect out there. And yeah, it just has so much variety that you can't deny that it's going to be a lot of fun to play. And I find myself using it very, very, very often still. All right, the complicated aspects have not stopped. So we have Aspect of Hades for the spear. So what happens here is you use your spin attack, it's much bigger, and it deals more damage. And after you hit an enemy with your spin attack, they get debuffed for the next 10 seconds, and they take additional attack or special damage. However, that does not include spin damage. That was specifically excluded. So while you can use the spin to hit enemies and apply the debuff, you wouldn't want to keep spinning on top of the enemies because you would not be dealing any of that bonus damage. So ideally you'd spin on top of the enemy, then either just use your regular attack, or you'd use some of your special in order to utilize that bonus damage. And it's one enemy at a time. So this is a decent aspect. We've seen it do some really good things at high heat. It does not perform very quickly, though. It doesn't have like super particular builds to it that are like crazy. It's kind of just middle of the road, I feel. I think it does okay. I think it kind of struggles with variety a lot here too. So I think it kind of winds up in a similar space to Arthur for me. But I would probably have more fun playing with it just because the spins, I don't know, there's something about the spins that are just fun, honestly. Just charging up a big juicy spin and throwing it out on the enemies. But yeah, I do admit there's not a lot of ways to use it well. It kind of is very hammer dependent. And then it's kind of hard to know how to build it too, because you can't really focus too much on the spins. Like you can't go all in on spin hammers. You have to think about diverging that, which I guess makes it perhaps a more complicated and interesting aspect. But yeah, I think it's, yeah, high C sounds about right for me. Next, we got aspect of Guan Yu. This is the hidden aspect, and this is going to be one that y'all are going to, I swear, y'all are going to hate me for this one. So it has a major drawback. Even at the max level, you lose half of your max HP, and that is for the entire run. Even if you get more max HP in the middle of the run, you will only get half of it. So picking up 25 max HP, you only get 12, honey. But the trade-off is you get a life-stealing spin move. When you use the spin, you will get +1 health for every hit you deal to enemies. Current health, of course, I mean. Also, the special move is much, much more usable compared to the vanilla spear special. It's just, it deals a lot more damage. You don't have to retrieve the spear either, so it's much faster. So, aspect of Guan Yu, it's terrible unless you have it maxed out on in terms of level. Taking negative 70% HP, if you only, just unlocked it, it's going to feel horrible. It's going to taste horrible. Everything is going to be terrible about it, essentially. But at max level, and once you know some of the nuances behind it, it is actually very, very strong. It doesn't do especially good at speed. It's okay at higher levels of heat, I would say, but it has a decent amount of variety because there are special builds, there are spin builds. Those are the two main ones, and you can definitely apply many different gods to it, I'd say, because of that. So believe it or not, but for me, I think this actually gets up there because there's some cheesy builds for Guan Yu. You can actually power up the spin in such a way where it feels very difficult to actually die, you know what I mean? It's still gonna be a little risky with that minus HP, but I think the variety and the fun that I have with it is really much higher than some of the other aspects. Honestly, I recommend trying it out, and I'll probably have some links to different videos that you could check out from me that kind of showcase the different aspects here. By the way, in the description, I'll try to have some link for y'all. And we're on to the shield. So aspect of Zagreus for the shield, all it does is increase your attack and dash strike base damage by 15 at max level. So it's trying to enable, I guess, an attack-based build with the shield, but the problem is those builds are just not great, or at the very best, they are very hammer dependent. There are certain hammers that would empower your attack that allow you to, say, hit twice, but it removes the knockback. There's also one that empowers your dash attack, and that's like kind of it, sadly. So it's just not the most interesting aspect. It doesn't do anything especially well. It doesn't do anything better than any other aspect too, in particular, which is unfortunate. So I think it kind of winds up with the other Zag aspects. I would probably put it behind Zag Spear. Now, because it is a shield, though, it does do a bit better at the higher heats more easily, I guess you could say. You could still cheese things out with the bull rush and everything. But, I mean, I don't know if it's that much easier, especially if you look at it from a new player perspective, I would think. I don't know if it's going to be that much easier, and there's really no reason to use it over some of the other shield aspects. All right, aspect of chaos for the shield, baby. So this is going to be a big one for me. So I ranked this bad boy in S in my original tier list, and I'm here to say I was wrong. It came from a place of previous love from a version that this shield used to have that was a bit different in early access. Now, I made that tier list well after early access ended, but I still had a lot of playtime to put in front of me, I guess you could say, and my thoughts on this aspect have definitely changed throughout the years. Now, I have completed a very high heat level on Aspect of Chaos. I think I've completed 50 heat on it, but here's the problem with Aspect of Chaos. So let's read about what it does. After you use your Bull Rush, your next shield special throws multiple shields. So you get bonus 5 shields spin around out when you throw out your special. Now, while your special is thrown out, Zag cannot attack or charge another Bull Rush. So kind of leaves Zag in a vulnerable state. when you do that. And those shields just kind of are thrown at total random. They're just kind of like, I don't know, spread out across the room in a weird way. And it doesn't even work in a sort of shotgun format where you would get right up in front of an enemy and throw all your shields all at once. The damage just isn't there. It's just kind of not worth it. It does work in a cheesy way if you wanted to try to play things very safely. It kind of works. It's going to be slow. It's not going to deal a ton of damage, but it is quite safe. Now, is it fun? I do think it has better variety than some of the other aspects here, because you can throw some different gods on the special and make it feel pretty good, like Zeus, like Dionysus, like Ares. It'll actually feel pretty good with those gods. It's going to feel really bad with all the percentage-based gods like Aphrodite and Artemis, though, if you throw them on the special. So I think for me, Chaos has moved down quite a bit from S, I would say. I do think it has decent variety, but I think the power is clearly not there in terms of heat and speed, at least compared to some of the other better aspects. So to me, I think she's actually fallen from grace a bit here to the bees. And my opinion has changed. I mean, I'll sit here and admit people have made some good points about the aspect. And I think, like I said, I had a lot of time still to play the game after that point, and I think the more I use the aspect of chaos, the more I feel like I'm disappointed. So who knows, maybe in 2 more years it'll be even lower. So aspect of Zeus, your special is replaced with the Blitz Disc. This is kind of vague as to what it does, right? But basically you can throw out your special and it slowly spins around, and while it's out there and spinning, you can still charge your bull rush or use your attack, almost as if you have 2 shields at once. And infamously, this is the aspect that managed to clear 64 heat. However, I do want to make it clear that just because this aspect was able to clear 64 heat, that does not necessarily mean it is the most powerful aspect in the game. The Pact of Punishment is a very complex system where it just really required these very specific attributes to be in place for the aspects in order for them to even have a decent chance, or really any chance, of beating 64 heat. So in other words, just because Aspect of Zeus was used to beat 64 heat, the max heat in the game, by the way, that does not necessarily mean, say, it's the best aspect used to beat 32 heat as a new player or someone trying to beat it for the first time. But that's all kind of more subjective than I can really explain. Anyway, how do I feel about this aspect? I think it's very good, and it has a decent amount of variety where a lot of the different gods can fit in on the special and or the attack. It also can use more hammers than the average shield aspect here too, since you can kind of think about using the special and or the attack hammers. The only problem is it's not really the aspect's fault, it's the weapon's fault. The special oriented hammers for the shield are just unfortunately not very good. But it is a very strong aspect. It's not very quick. It doesn't do well at the speedy runs, unfortunately, but it's pretty solid up there too. It is a tougher aspect to use. I actually consider it probably one of the highest skill cap, I guess you could say, aspects in the game, where it takes a lot in order to use it really well, where you need to charge your bull rush while throwing the shield out and then choosing to pull back your special, and it's just hard. It's actually very difficult to manage it all, but yeah, it is quite powerful. Okay, so we have come to what I would call the strongest aspect in the game, with an asterisk, you know, I guess you could say. Aspect of Beowulf for the shield. So you take 10% more damage when using this, which I always thought was kind of an odd thing to tack onto here, but okay. So you get a damage area and bonus. What am I saying? You get bonus damage and area when you load your cast in with Aspect of Beowulf. So Aspect of Beowulf works in, it's a cast aspect where you load your cast into it, essentially. You press the cast button and then you charge in with your bull rush, and your cast will explode at the end of your bull rush. Now this aspect is totally broken. It gains more benefits than it should from the Dual Boon Mirage Shot, where you will gain 100% bonus cast damage, and it has a couple other quirks and oddities behind it. It didn't get tested very much in early access is the reason why. Unfortunately for the devs, I guess, but fortunate for us as players, because there's not a lot of stuff like this in the game. This is definitely the most heavily abused. It is absolutely amazing at speedruns. It is very strong at high heat, and it has insane amounts of variety And not to mention, it's just like incredibly powerful from pretty much every perspective. Just having all those different casts be a possible build with this is just absolutely amazing. It is easily going to be probably the top aspect here. Now, you might have noticed that in some other videos, I might have called this or that aspect could be the strongest. And that's where the asterisk comes in, where it's not necessarily the easiest to use, or so to speak, or perhaps I should say the easiest to explain or build upon, because you do require to get kind of certain things for Beowulf to get going. There's really only one good hammer for this aspect, or I should say there's a big difference between the best hammer and the next best hammer. The best hammer for is charged shot. The next best hammer is, I don't know, sudden rush, and it's just mediocre to say the least, at least in comparison to charged shot. So that's a bit of a problem. But we'll go over some of the other great aspects later on. But yeah, Beowulf, absolutely amazing. And we're at the bow. Here we go, baby. Aspect of Zag for the bow. So you just simply gain 15% crit chance even. Passive on your attack when you use the bow. Aspect of Zag for the bow, that is. So this one is one of the better Zag aspects for sure. But it's just not very exciting, that's for sure. So the variety is not really there. You would not really use your special with Zag aspect on the bow here ever, unfortunately. There's not really a build where it works. There is technically a hammer called Charge Volley, but it's just still not great. It just kind of doesn't matter. So you really just have one style of build, which is to dash attack over and over and over again. So the variety, very limited on Zag aspect of the bow. The speed is okay. The high heat is actually decent because, mostly because it's a bow aspect more than anything. It can definitely clear a higher heat, not too badly. So for me, I think it kind of manages to escape the D's, but not by a whole lot. It's mostly just because it's mostly low because it's just not very interesting, I think, here, where you just power up the attack and that's all there is to it, unfortunately. One thing I can say is that the bow probably has the most interesting hammers out there, where they have the bow just has a lot of transformative hammers, that's for sure, I think, where there's just so many different things that you can use whenever using the bow. It feels like there's always a hammer that you're going to be okay with, maybe not ecstatic about, but it's pretty rare you get totally dud hammers on the bow, I feel. Anyway, we're moving on. We're doing aspect of Chiron, everybody's favorite, or supposedly everyone's favorite, I should say. So what happens to aspect of Chiron? When you hit an enemy with your attack, you will lock onto them so that when you use your special, all those special arrows will automatically hit them, or should I say home in on them, and it goes up to 8 hits. If you don't have the aspect maxed out, it's not going to feel great, by the way. This one's kind of a controversial one because, admittedly, aspect of Chiron, it stinks at speedruns. It's terrible, honestly. It might be the slowest aspect in the game, potentially. I haven't looked at the records lately, but it's definitely one of the slowest then. It does okay at high heat. Now, what is high heat is another question. You know, if you want to say 32 heat, well, it does amazing at 32 heat. But if you want to look at the record for the highest heat it has ever been beaten by a player with the aspect of Chiron, it's one of the lowest ones, actually, believe it or not. And this kind of comes from a complicated place where using your attack and then having to use your special a couple of times after that, it is incredibly slow. It kind of both stems from a place of it is slow to do the attack pattern of aspect of Chiron, where you have to use your attack and then you have to use your special a couple times afterwards. It is a multi-hit setup, not totally different from aspect of Hades for the spear, perhaps, right? The difference here is that it feels like the ease of use is a little bit better, and even more so. And what's more important is that the sheer variety you get out of this aspect is just way, way higher. Most of the gods work on the special. Pretty much every single one does, except for maybe Ares. You know, it just doesn't really make sense to throw Ares on the special here. And you can see that it gets a lot of love from the casual and new player base. And I think the reason is simply because it's a fun aspect. There's really no other way to describe it. I did an entire video analyzing a bunch of 32 heat win screens from players who beat 32 heat for the first time, and the majority actually had done it with aspect of Chiron. And, you know, that's just what it is, you know what I mean? So even though I think we live in a game, we play a game here where that is complex enough to say that even though it's has one of the lowest heat records in terms of being the highest, has possibly the worst speedrun record, but is somehow, in some way, better than other aspects at completing 16 or 32 heat, perhaps, you know? The game is complex, you know what I mean? It has to do with combining different packs. And I just love this aspect. I probably don't even have to say it, but I really enjoy using this aspect. I never have a bad time playing with this aspect. Again, because it feels like I can't really have a bad build with it, it kind of feels. You know what I mean? It's just fun. It has a lot of single target damage. It kind of struggles with the AoE damage. And again, it's kind of slower because you got to do with this little setup. But my golly, I love it. I absolutely love it. So for me, I think it does wind up in the S's still, but it will be a lower S, I think, now, which is probably, only ever so slightly different from my original tier list. Next, we got Aspect of Hera, another cast aspect. So your cast loads into your next attack, and it explodes, not really explodes, not like Beowulf, but it does load into your attack just like Beowulf, and then it hits all the enemies on the impact of the attack. It also makes your cast drop off the enemies much more quickly. This is an incredibly powerful aspect. It is one of the fastest aspects of the game, up there with Beowulf for sure, but probably not quite beating it out. It also has an insane amount of variety because, again, it's a cast aspect. So you can use all the different casts with it. And you might see a lot of this going on in the tier list here because a weapon, or an aspect rather, that can utilize all the different casts in the game is going to automatically have a lot more variety behind it. So yes, you can use your attack and get a lot of attack-based hammers and empower your attack with Aspect of Hera, but you can also work on the cast on the side, and it's not really that much different from, say, Aspect of Zag Rail, you know what I mean? You just get, the benefits are just so much better. This is a great aspect. I absolutely love it. I suggest trying that with either Crush Shot or Flood Shot. Those are both great with it, fantastic. But the truth is, it works with almost everything, and that's why it's so much fun, I think, here. It is definitely, I think I said it was one of the fastest. It does fine. It does pretty good at high heat. I think this baby clears 32 heat very easily for a lot of people. And this is where I think I'm diverging a little bit, where I've had more fun with this aspect the more I played the game, even after thousands of hours. So I think this is moving up to S, and I believe it was only A before, if you can believe it. Next is Aspect of Rama. So how does Rama work? It is a slower aspect, not too dissimilar to Arthur, in which that your attack charges much more slowly. It also requires kind of some setup here. So what you want to do is hit enemies with the special, and it'll apply Shared Suffering. Shared Suffering makes enemies take more damage, or rather allows the damage to spread around. So if you hit an enemy with the special, they will then take 60% of your next attack, and that could include the same enemy you're hitting with the attack. Does that make sense? If you apply Shared Suffering to a boss and then hit them with the attack, they will essentially take, the original attack hit plus 60% more on top of that, but it'll also spread to other enemies that you've hit with your special recently. It doesn't last a long time, 7 seconds it looks. How do you make this go away, for the love of God? But it is a very powerful aspect. I do think, it actually has some decent variety now that I think about it. It's not a quick aspect. It doesn't do very well at speed runs. It does very well at high heat though. It can definitely deliver a punch. So I think it's cleared like 60 heat potentially. But yeah, I think it's hard to use. For some reason, I wouldn't say I have a ton of fun with it. And it probably has to do with the slow nature of it, which is kind of a juxtaposition to the rest of the game, which is meant to be much more fast paced. I do think it is the sheer power makes up for it, though. And while it has kind of some weirdness where you can spam just the special, I guess, I'm kind of convincing myself it probably deserves an A, but maybe a lower A, I think. It is, you can tell that I kind of like the bow a little bit here, huh? But yeah, Rama is definitely interesting to say the least. All right. We're on to the Fist. So we got Aspect of Zag here. So you get 15% dodge chance with Aspect of Zag for the Fist. And this is actually one of the better Zag aspects, I think. One of the reasons that the Fists kind of feel better, I think, for a lot of people is that the base fists, I feel, are stronger than most of the other base weapons. What is that? What do I mean by that? I don't feel like the fists need like a very particular hammer to get going. The hammers are all gravy on top of an already decently powerful weapon. But I do think the fists kind of suffer from having a lot of interesting variety behind them. But at the same time, because the base is so good, most of the gods kind of work when you throw them on the attack, you know what I mean? That's why aspect of Zag here is actually going to be okay. I do think 15% dodge chance is actually very, very strong. And I think it kind of winds up a cut above. I mean, I probably, if I were to say, where do I have, how do I have more fun playing this than some of these other aspects? I'd say I'd have more fun than any of those personally, which might seem kind of odd compared to the others. But yeah, combine that with the lambent plume from Hermes and getting a lot of dodge going is just a lot of fun, and it just pairs way too well with this aspect to turn it down. Aspect of Talos. So you get I don't even know how to describe this thing. Your special becomes magnetic cutter and its pull deals 20 damage. So what does that mean? You use your special, you pull enemies towards you, it deals, you know, minute damage, 20, and it applies a debuff to that one enemy that makes them take 50% attack and cast damage if you were to hit them afterwards. So how is this aspect? Well, it's interesting. And you might wonder, how could this be worse than the Zag aspect? And I think it's kind of like it tricks you into thinking that you should be using the special a lot in order to get that bonus damage. But the bonus damage, I feel like, just was never enough. I do think it winds up okay, but I think it's kind of just not great, though, at the same time. I think it's not really a cast aspect. You might say, oh, you get 50% bonus cast damage, but you have to hit the enemy with a special in order to get that damage. Compare that to aspect of Poseidon for the sword, and you just get 50% passive cast damage all the time. You know what I mean? I think that buff damage, or rather that debuff, should have made enemies take way, way more. And I do think the special move for the fist is kind of lackluster unless you kind of gear it out with particular hammers, potentially. So therefore, I think this aspect kind of falls flat, and I would not generally want to use it over almost all the other aspects here for the fist, unfortunately. But I'll admit it's like kind of fine in terms of power. How is it at speed? It's average. Pretty much all the fists are the same in terms of speed and in terms of heat, in which, you know, they're melee aspects, so they're not great. They kind of require that you get like Athena's dash and some other safety things in order to get anything going on. But it's just kind of winds up in a mediocre place, I think, aspect of Talos. Now, here's a fun aspect we're talking about. Aspect of Demeter. So after you land 12 strikes, meaning your attacks, your next special hits more times, up to 5 times. This is a really fun aspect, let me tell you. So if you build up, let's say you choose, there's just certain hammers that work really well here. Namely, explosive upper or kinetic launcher. Those are the big ones that can, you know, really deliver some juicy things. And while I think that the more I've played, the more I feel like it's, you know, the damage maybe isn't there compared to some of the highest tiered aspects here, but it definitely is fun. You gotta admit there's definitely variety here, because now you can build up either the attack or the special or both. You can kind of split it and kind of, you know, you'll try to share the damage load between your attack and your special, which I think just makes it a lot more fun, and it makes it a lot more interesting than the other aspects here. So I think I'm throwing this bad boy. Give me like a solid, oh boy, give me a solid, you know what, it deserves a low A, I think. Aspect of Gilgamesh. You have the claws of Enkidu, whose dash upper can maim foes. So maim damage is weird. It's kind of like doom damage. It will tick down on the enemy and eventually hit them for a chunk, like 400 damage at the most. It also makes them take more damage while they are maimed, by the way. But it also makes you take more damage while they're maimed as well. It's a weird downside to have, to be honest. Gilgamesh is also special in that you get an additional dash, and your dashes are a bit different, where you just can hold down the dash button, and so they're kind of like slightly shorter, I guess. I don't know, the sound is different. So what do I think of this weapon? Well, I think it is supremely underpowered, to be honest. I think the attack hits for like nothing. Like the base attack damage is so incredibly low, it's disgusting. And the special on its own is practically inusable. The damage is just so incredibly low. They really traded off that extra dash way too hard here. They kind of stole a lot of coolness from this aspect, I think, that it could have been if they just, you know, upped that base damage just a little bit. Of course it's still usable. It's just, it's terrible at speedruns. It's terrible at high heat. I'm sorry. It's just bad at all those things. And for me, I don't have fun playing with it. You can't really use cast with it. The main thing kind of doesn't work well. And it's just super dangerous is the best way to describe it. Now, the one fun thing I do get out of it is to do dash only runs where your only usable button is the dash and you just keep empowering whatever dash boon you get over and over again. It works well with Aspect of Gilgamesh. That gives you more dashes, right? But that's about it. That's like the only use case I got for this thing. But I will definitely put it above at least some of the Zag aspects. But yeah, I don't have fun playing with it. I know, I was harsh. I was harsh on the Fist, I know. But here we go. We're on to the Rail here. We got Aspect of Zag for the Rail where you get bonus ammo. Now, this is a tough one because, to be honest, this aspect compared to some of the other Rail aspects is pretty much useless. You would never use this aspect. There is one condition, and that is if somehow you know that you're going to get a hammer called Spread Fire, but you would never even know that ahead of time. I guess you'd fish for it, right? But you just don't know if that's going to happen. But at the same time, so there's no reason to use this aspect most of the time, but at the same time, it performs okay. It's fine. It's better than many other aspects in the game in total, but it's almost never better than some of the other Rail aspects. So, yeah, the bonus ammo is just not good. It also conflicts with so many hammers and makes them just not interesting. Like Delta Chamber gives you infinite ammo, so therefore this aspect doesn't do anything, you know, if you pick up Delta Chamber along the way. So for me, the use cases are pretty low, so I think it does wind up in the, like, oh my god, I got a lot of D aspects here, you know what I mean? But yeah, I think it, I don't know. The power is still pretty good. Like, I'd probably have more fun with it than Gilgamesh, but I think it is just very narrow where you would really only use this if you're gonna take Zeus's attack and hope to get more Zeus boons, and that's sort of the end of the use cases, unfortunately. Next up, we got Aspect of Eris. Here we go, baby. Now this is turning things around. And this is the aspect that explains why Aspect of Zagreus is just not very good. It's not very useful. It just doesn't really do anything special, you know, because this thing exists, unfortunately. So when you use your special and you stand in the blast of the special, you will get 75% bonus damage for 4 seconds afterwards. And that bonus damage applies to everything. Your dash, your cast, your attack, your special. Like, every single ounce of damage you do will get increased, except for summons, but whatever, that's nothing. That doesn't mean anything. So this is an incredibly powerful aspect. It does amazing at speed runs. It does very well at high heat. And it has a ton of variety. That 75% bonus global damage enables so many different things to be usable. You can put pretty much whatever you want on the attack. And the Rail has a very diverse and strong set of hammers where you can focus on either the attack or the special and do really well. There's some crazy hammer combinations out there for this. This is easily an S tier, and for me, I think it belongs in the second place, I think. Next is the aspect of Hestia, and I might have some bias toward this aspect, to be honest, because I love this aspect, by the way. So after you manually reload, your next shot is empowered. That empoweredness just basically means it deals a lot more damage. If you don't have this aspect maxed out, it's probably not going to feel great. So you'd want to get in the habit of shoot, reload, shoot, reload, shoot, reload, just one bullet at a time. You don't really want to have to think about possibly expending the rest of your clip. You just don't even consider it. Just try to force yourself into this habit. But it is an incredibly strong aspect. It's actually coming up in the world of the speedruns, believe it or not. The meta has shifted where it does better. It does incredibly well at high heat. I still, as of recording this at least, hold the unmodded, unseeded world record for 58 heat cleared with this aspect. It took forever to do, just to be clear. But yes, it is still incredibly strong. But I will say the variety is very narrow on this, where you would really only use the attack, and you would only play this aspect one way, where you attack, you attack, reload, attack, reload, attack, reload. Yeah, you can get some special hammers and use those too, but its gameplay loop is quite narrow, I think I have to admit. So for me, it still definitely winds up in the A's, just because I think the power levels are so high with it, but it definitely suffers from a lack of variety. Aspect of Lucifer, the last one. So you have Igneous Eden, which launches volatile Hellfire. Hellfire blast damage goes up to 100. So what does that mean? So you fire a laser instead, and you drop bombs that will explode when you attack or an enemy attacks them. So this aspect is quirky. It actually has a good amount of variety, and it's actually really well designed and animated. It fires a laser beam, right? But the lasers are all colored whichever god you use. So if you have Aphrodite, your laser is pink. If you have Poseidon, your laser is going to be blue. It actually looks great. It's a fantastic looking weapon. However, it doesn't function very well. It's very slow. It's terrible at high heat, to be honest. And it does have a good amount of use cases, but not a ton. It's definitely not, like, it doesn't belong down in the dredges of D, I think. But I think I'm being generous by throwing it in the B. I think it has some variety, but the truth is, if you don't put Zeus on the attack here, you're probably going to have a rough time playing this aspect at, say, 32 heat, or if you're trying to speedrun with it. But if you're just trying to have fun in the game, it does offer a lot there. Oh boy, how do I wind up in this place where I have barely anything in B? Shouldn't most things be in B, if anything? You know what I'm saying? I think for me, I would rather play it than Arthur, so that's how I'm determining where I'm putting it. All right, that is my tier list, and I tried to not watch my old tier list just to see where I would wind up. I did glance at the end of my old one just to check on a few different things, but I didn't really want to listen to all my different thoughts and processes because I kind of want to get a more honest thought on where the aspects are now in my mind here. And I hope you all had fun with it, you know what I mean? Again, I'd love to know what y'all think, and tell me your opinions in the comments. If you got any questions, make sure you go ahead and ask me. I'll try to link a bunch of different example videos where we use the different aspects in the description as well. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Remember to like, remember to comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.